If you watched the French onion and oxtail soup video, which I hope that you did, you know that I set you up to have extra beef stock. Having extra stock in the freezer is one of the great joys of life. So I have some of that backup stock. And when I had it in my own house, I made myself some beef and barley soup. And then I thought, well, if I can make the beef and barley soup, everybody should make the beef and barley soup. My mom used to always make a barley soup. After Thanksgiving, she would make a barley soup with turkey. So there were versions with pork, there were versions with turkey. I'm sure sometimes there was versions with beef. The aromatics in the French onion and oxtail soup that I use for French onion soup already had some cinnamon. It already has star anise in it. So those flavors were originally inspired by pho. So it just made sense to me using the stock in the preparation of the beef and barley soup to keep going with those base flavors. And I'm adding mushrooms to it, and that all like goes together. To begin, I'm adding cinnamon and star anise, which are in the stock itself, along with some coriander seeds. And I'm gonna toast them in this dry saucepan, whatever this is, little stock pot. The other thing about this soup that I'm kind of into is that the French onion and oxtail stock made a gallon. So you don't have to make French onion soup if you don't want to. You can just make that stock. It's a great base stock. And for this soup, I only used a couple of quarts of it. So you're kind of making like a little pot of soup for two, which I'm also really into. It's like cozy. You don't have to make a giant batch. Maybe you made that big batch of stock, but now you kind of just do whatever. So toasting these aromatics, they're changing color. The flavors are getting released into the air. It smells like really delicious sweet spice potpourri. So these sweet spices are delicious on their own. They're delicious with the beef stock, but they also are very complementary to just the flavors of beef. So if you haven't had star anise before, it has a licoricey flavor. You could substitute anise seed, or you could substitute fennel seeds. Cinnamon, I think most of us are familiar with. And then the coriander is from cilantro. It's got that very bright, like lemony, fresh, herbaceous flavor. They're together in a lot of things, in a lot of cuisines, a lot of the time. So they're together here today. So I'm gonna let these cool down a bit. And in the meantime, I'm going to get my aromatics. So the pot is already warmed up. I'm gonna use vegetable oil. I just need enough to kind of give the surface of these vegetables something to stick to. I have about a thumb-sized piece of ginger. You don't have to peel it for this. I'm just gonna cut that in half, toss it in. Same thing with the onions. You kind of have the option at the end of eating the onion that's been simmered, or you can take it out. It kind of just depends on the texture of it, if that's appealing to you or not. I'm going to keep it attached at the root while it's in here. I want everything to pick up a lot of color. So there's sweetness is going to get developed, but also that like kind of dark, smoky, charred flavor. A little bit of a bitter sweet flavor is the goal. And so to get that, you know, you almost have to let these burn and not be freaked out about it. Because maybe that very cut side, the very surface is going to have the burning and the charring, but the rest of the onion is just going to be its own sweet oniony self. So it's not going to give it a bad flavor. I see and smell smoke. So in order to develop that flavor and the darkness and the level of char, you don't want to like move them around constantly. They need to just sit and do their thing. But every once in a while, I'm going to pick them up. I'm going to let oil flow back underneath. I'm just going to make sure that they're browning and not sticking. That's going to take somewhere between 7 and 10 minutes. In the meantime, I can prep my mushrooms. You can use any mushroom that you like, anything that will simmer nicely. And in the first imagining of the recipe, I felt like I had to brown the mushrooms first, which is like another step, and then take them out, but they won't be crispy. And then I was like, no, I'm just gonna simmer them in the broth, and they're gonna have all of their mushroom flavor is gonna basically create like mushroom stock, beef stock. So I'm just gonna tear them into pieces. And if I didn't have oysters, I think my next choice would have been hanshimeji, which are really easy to find in Asian markets where maybe you're going to get your ginger and your your star anise anyway. And there's going to be sliced beef in the market. We went to H Mart, which is a wonderful place. Hanshimeji are like, they look like cartoon mushrooms. They have the long stem and the cute little cap, and there's white ones and brown ones. And they come in little cellophane packets that are the perfect kind of weight for this. Beef and barley soup makes sense with mushrooms. It feels like it's supposed to have mushrooms. I know it's a choice, but it just feels like, the right choice. So tearing these, they're gonna shrink a little. Just wanna get them on our spoon later. All right, let's take a peek at these. Oh yeah, okay. Whoopee. You bastardo. Why, so slippery. Okay, so that's like almost burned. It's very, very dark. There's some golden on the outside. The part in the middle is sticking out the most and hitting the pan. So that's a color that I'm looking for. I'm just gonna get the other side of that for a second. Same thing on the shallot. Looking very beautiful. I can't pick it up. It's really annoying. Oh, that one's so pretty though. Maybe Tim, you just have to come in. They're like weeble wobbles. Okay. So I've got pearled barley here. There's so many different barleys in lots of different colors. When you go to the store, you'll probably see Bob's Red Mill. They're like all over the country. But any pearled barley, what does pearled mean, or pearl barley? It just means that the most outer kind of husk has been abraded and some of that hull has been scraped off. And what that means is that it's going to cook a little bit faster than one that has that whole exoderm on it. You can use a barley that takes longer to cook. It's just going to take longer to cook. Pearl barley will take you about 25 or 30 minutes to cook all the way through, which is a really nice amount of time to get flavor development from the other things. But if you wanted to go further past like sort of an al dente or a tenderness of the barley, you can keep cooking it. You can cook it for an hour, and eventually what will happen is the grains will kind of unfurl, almost like a kernel of popcorn. I really enjoyed it that way too. It was like softer, but it had this different kind of a texture. So it's kind of up to you where you end up with the doneness. But I do want to toast the barley a tiny bit in this hot pan before I add the stock. So you should be able to see a little bit of browning on the outside of the barley. The ginger flavor is really coming up now, and it's really nice. And from here, I'm just gonna pour in the stock. If you only have 1 quart of stock in the house, just do a quart of stock and a quart of water. You don't have to use beef stock. You can make a vegetarian version of this with mushroom stock or any kind of vegetable stock. You could do a chickeny version. So it's extremely versatile. And if you used water, this will still taste really, really good because it's got the onion, the shallot, the ginger, the spices. It's going to get these mushrooms. So this is a casual, like homey, delicious dish that we're just kind of amping up with some of these sweet spices, these warmer spices. And speaking of the spices, I think it's time to crush them. Okay, yeah, everything is cool. So I'm just going to use my mortar and pestle to bash these up. They don't have to be powdered. They're going to be taken out at the end. And if you don't have a mortar and pestle, use a spice grinder. I don't like this advice, but it's the advice we always give, is that if you don't have a spice grinder or a mortar and pestle, you can put the spices on your cutting board and use the bottom of a pan to crush them. I find that to be incredibly frustrating. Just break them up into pieces and don't worry about the coriander. All right, so these are mashed and bashed. If you are a cheesecloth household, you can wrap your spices in cheesecloth. I don't have any, or I didn't have any when I was doing this. I don't have any now. So I just got out a tea strainer and I'm gonna put the spices in to the tea strainer. The reason I'm like putting them in and taking them out is just that the cinnamon and the star anise are pretty brittle and hard, and they're also very strongly flavored. So you don't wanna get like a bite of cinnamon. But I did want the flavor, and I wanted the toasting, and I wanted the breaking up for flavor extraction. So I'm just using this little tea strainer. You could use one of those paper tea bags, the ones that are like for using loose leaf tea. So now this cute little aromatic spiced tea is going in. and I can add the mushrooms. So that's it. That is all of the kind of work at the front that you have to do. Of course, you spent 6 hours making your own beef stock, which is why this is going to taste so great. But it's very simple to get this soup up and running, and I just want to give it a little taste. I didn't season, I don't think I even salted the veg that got browned yet. My guess is that it's going to need salt. It does. Not a ton. This isn't going to reduce very much, but the barley is going to absorb some of this available liquid. And if it's simmering and you feel like it looks a little low or the barley needs more time, but you feel like you lost more liquid than you were anticipating, just top off with water. And that's it. So I'm bringing this to a simmer, and then she's simmering till the barley's done. It turns out I did something wrong. I was not supposed to put the entire onion in there, but I did, and it's fine. What you're supposed to do is reserve half the onion for the garnish, and I have a red onion, so we're going to use that. And the fact that there's an extra half onion in the soup is just going to make it more delicious. But when you do this, you won't have to use 1.5 onions, because that's annoying. You'll just use the 1 onion. Half in the soup and half for the garnish. You could use anything oniony for your garnish. You want to use some sliced scallions, that would be great. You could use shallot. You could use any color of the onions. You could even just use chives, and that would be fun as well. And then I've got some ice water here. This is also optional, but I like doing it. It just makes the onion a little less sharp and deflames it. But if you're all about the pungent onion, then you don't have to soak it. So that's basically it for garnish. All right, so my soup is done. I've got the barley really tender, but still has a little bit of a bite to it, which is how I like it. But like I said, I also liked it kind of overcooked and unfurled. Mushroomy, sweet, gingery, delicious. Okay, so as things were simmering along, things were happening with my onions. So the cups of the onion are like separating into individual cups. Look, they're a cup of soup. Serve it like this, little tiny cups of soup. So if you want to eat that, go for it. If it's not something that you want to find in your bowl, don't. It's totally up to you. But they're like tender and sweet and nice. I'm doing the same thing with the shallot. So just kind of like helping them find their individual solo albums and groove. And we have nice tender mushrooms and the hunks of ginger. So to serve it, you could just serve it as is. But I stole another thing from the way that pho is served sometimes when it's beef pho. I think a lot of people on the West Coast have 99 Market. We have H Mart here in my tri-state area. And what's cool is in H Mart, you can just go to, there's like hot pot meat that's already thinly sliced. They also have like everything prepped for grilling and if you wanted to make sushi and like a million other things. This is a cut that's labeled that it's for hot pot, which is the same thing that you would put the raw meat into the simmering broth and you would cook it right there as you're putting your bowl together. So we know it's going to be tender. It's super thinly sliced. So I'm just going to take a few little slices, put them in the bottom of the bowl. And again, fully optional, don't need to do this. Or if you wanted the meat cooked more, you could take a few slices and put it directly into the soup. If you don't have an H Mart and you don't have an Asian market that has pre-sliced beef, you would be looking for like a ribeye. You could do a little piece of filet. You could do a piece of chuck. You just want to slice it very thinly so it's tender. I'm just gonna ladle right over. Yum! I know Cosmo really likes this soup, but he's playing Fortnite right now, so there's no way in hell he'll come down. Although he is financially incentivized. I cut him into rev share, so he does does get a portion of the proceeds. I don't want a big piece of onion because I'm just not that person. Well, maybe, okay, fine, I'll try it. So as far as garnishes go, I've got the sliced onion from before, my extra half onion, and then some herbs. This was really, really nice with dill. You could use cilantro. You could use some mint if you wanted to. I've got a little bit of parsley and just tearing those over the bowl. Optional, little sriracha. Never optional for me. Have to have it. Spice up your life. Great for digestion. great for bringing color back to the face. I think I was born to be like a commercial model in like 1974. Ladies, have you been feeling a little down and dour? Is your complexion kind of faded and pale? Is everybody saying, gee, Susie Joe, are you sick? Then you know what you need to do is add a little sriracha to your soup. That's what I would sell. But I'll sell you on this beef and barley soup. Oh my God. It's fantastic. The little bit of beef at the end did amp up the little bit of beefy flavor. Makes sense. Frankly, it's one of the great brown foods of the world, which is another reason to make it. Because brown food tastes good, and enjoy and embrace Browntown. Look at me embracing raw onion and dill in the same bowl. Wow, I've come so far. Beef and barley soup, it's a classic. It's been around. You've seen it, you know it. Or do you? Because you have some very special beef stock that you already made that has some nice, warm, toasty aromas. You're gonna keep riding that train all the way here. Barley, beautiful mushrooms, bright herbs, a little bit of color-inducing, flush to your cheeks, sriracha, and that to me is the perfect soup, all in one bowl.
Cool. Speeding on the wide, speeding here.
It's about a cupping. That's how you get the nice clap.
Can't force.
You can't, if you do that, you get a shitty. Okay.